I'm Maya, 28, and I thought I knew my family until 3 days ago, when my parents uninvited me from their 30th anniversary celebration. Family only, Mom said coldly, while my sister Emma smirked behind her. The betrayal cut deep, but nothing prepared me for what I'd discover scrolling through social media that night. Emma's Instagram post from their intimate family gathering revealed a truth so devastating it would shatter everything I believed about blood loyalty and the people who raised me. Sometimes the cruelest lies hide behind the warmest smiles. Hey everyone, before we dive into this wild family drama that literally turned my world upside down, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. If you've ever felt like the black sheep in your family, smash that like button because this story is going to take you on an emotional roller coaster. Don't forget to subscribe because trust me, you're going to want to hear how this revenge story unfolds. Let's get into it. The exclusion from my parents' anniversary party wasn't entirely unexpected. I'd been the family disappointment for years, the daughter who chose art school over medical school, who questioned their conservative values, who dared to call out their obvious favoritism toward my younger sister Emma. But being told I wasn't welcome at a celebration of their marriage, that stung in ways I couldn't articulate. I spent that Saturday night in my studio apartment trying to focus on a painting commission while fighting back tears of frustration and hurt. My phone buzzed constantly with what I assumed were work emails, but curiosity eventually got the better of me. Opening Instagram, I was immediately hit with Emma's story post from the party. The photo showed our parents cutting an elaborate anniversary cake surrounded by maybe 15 people. I recognized our aunts, uncles, and a few family friends all smiling and raising glasses in celebration. The caption read, "30 years of true love. So blessed to celebrate Mom and Dad with our real family tonight. Some people just don't belong in sacred spaces." The passive-aggressive dig was typical Emma, but something else caught my eye. In the background, partially hidden behind Uncle Richard, stood a woman I'd never seen before. She looked to be in her early 20s with striking features that seemed oddly familiar. More unsettling was how she stood close to my father, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder, in a gesture I'd seen him use with Emma and me countless times growing up. I screenshot the photo and zoomed in, my artist's eye trained to notice details others might miss. The woman wore a delicate gold necklace identical to one my father had given my mother for their 25th anniversary. The same necklace Mom claimed was one of a kind, custom-made just for her. My hands trembling slightly, I scrolled through Emma's other posts from the evening. There were several group shots, and in each one this mysterious woman appeared increasingly comfortable with my family. In one photo, she was laughing with my mother. In another, she sat at the main table occupying what should have been my seat. But it was the final photo that made my blood run cold. A candid shot of my father and this woman having what appeared to be an intimate conversation by the window. The way she looked at him, the familiar tilt of her head, the shape of her nose, it was like staring at a younger version of myself. I called my cousin Jessica, who I knew had been at the party. She was the only family member who'd ever been honest with me about the dysfunction in our family dynamics. "Jess, who was that young woman at Mom and Dad's party tonight?" There was a long pause before she answered. "Maya, I was wondering when you'd ask about that. So you know who she is. Her name is Sophia. She's..." God, Maya, this is so messed up. "She's Dad's daughter." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean, Dad's daughter?" "From an affair he had in his early 40s. Mom has known for years. They've been secretly supporting her, and apparently she's been part of their lives for a while now." Tonight was her official introduction to the extended family. I felt like the ground was shifting beneath me. And Emma's known for over a year. "Maya, I'm so sorry. They specifically asked the family not to mention her to you. They said you wouldn't understand, that you'd make it about yourself." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of what I'd just learned. My parents had a secret daughter they'd been hiding from me for years. They'd chosen to exclude me from their anniversary celebration so they could officially welcome their love child into the family fold without dealing with my drama. But the betrayal went deeper than just the secret. Looking at those photos again, I realized Sophia wasn't just being introduced to the family, she was being positioned as Emma's sister, my replacement. The golden necklace, the place of honor at the table, the protective way Dad stood with her, these weren't gestures of reconciliation with an estranged child. These were the actions of parents who'd found a better version of their disappointing eldest daughter. The cruelest part was how they'd orchestrated my exclusion. They hadn't uninvited me because the party was too small or intimate. They'd uninvited me because my presence would have complicated their narrative. How could they celebrate their perfect marriage and introduce their affair baby while the living reminder of their hypocrisy sat at the same table? I spent the rest of the night going through old family photos looking for signs I'd missed. Dad's mysterious business trips during my college years. Mom's strange mood swings and increased criticism of me around that time. Emma's smug superiority whenever family events were planned without me. It was all starting to make sense. The most painful realization was that this wasn't just about Dad's infidelity. This was about my entire family's willingness to gaslight me, to make me feel like I was the problem, while they built a secret life around his betrayal. They'd spent years making me feel like I didn't belong in my own family because in their minds I didn't. They'd already found my replacement. By dawn, my shock had crystallized into something harder and more focused. I'd been painted as the family troublemaker for years, criticized for being too emotional, too dramatic, too unwilling to keep the peace. Well, they were about to discover what real drama looked like. I wasn't going to confront them with tears and accusations. I wasn't going to give them the opportunity to gaslight me further or paint me as the unhinged daughter who couldn't handle their happy news. Instead, I was going to use the one skill they'd always dismissed as worthless, my ability to research, document, and expose the truth. If they wanted to play happy family while erasing me from their story, I was going to make sure everyone knew the real story behind their 30-year love story. Some secrets are too big to stay buried, especially when they're hiding in plain sight on social media. The next morning brought a strange sense of calm. The initial shock had burned away, leaving behind something much more dangerous, crystal clear thinking. I'd spent years questioning myself, wondering why I never seemed to fit in my own family, why every gathering felt like walking on eggshells. Now I understood it was never about me. I was the inconvenient witness to their elaborate deception. I started with what I knew best: research. My art background had taught me to see patterns, to notice inconsistencies that others missed. I began systematically going through years of family photos, social media posts, and even old Christmas cards, looking for traces of Sophia or clues about Dad's double life. The evidence was everywhere once I knew what to look for. A photo from Emma's college graduation 3 years ago showed Dad checking his phone with an expression I now recognized: the look of a man managing multiple families. Mom's Facebook posts from around that time were filled with passive-aggressive quotes about loyalty and difficult children who don't appreciate sacrifice. At the time, I'd assumed they were directed at me for choosing art over their preferred career path. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. While scrolling through Dad's rarely used LinkedIn profile, I discovered he'd been listed as a reference for someone named Sofia Martinez at a local marketing firm. The dates aligned perfectly with when she would have been job hunting after college. He hadn't just been secretly supporting her financially, he'd been actively helping build her career, while simultaneously undermining mine, by refusing to use his business connections to help me establish my art career. I spent hours that Sunday creating a detailed timeline. Dad's affair had begun during what Mom had told everyone was their rough patch when I was in high school. Instead of working through their problems like they'd claimed, Dad had simply found a younger woman and created a parallel family. The timing explained so much why Mom had become increasingly critical and cold toward me during my senior year. Why Dad had suddenly become obsessed with family loyalty and keeping private matters private. The cruelest irony was that they'd used their guilty consciences about the affair to justify pushing me away. Every time I'd asked uncomfortable questions or refused to play along with their perfect family charade, they'd painted me as the problem child who couldn't respect boundaries. In reality, I'd been reacting to the lies and tension they'd brought into our home. But this wasn't just about exposing their hypocrisy anymore. This was about the systematic way they'd gaslit me for years, making me doubt my own perceptions and worth. They'd convinced extended family members that I was dramatic and unreliable, ensuring that even when the truth came out, people would question my motives for revealing it. I realized I needed allies, but I had to be strategic about it. Jessica had already shown she was uncomfortable with the family's deception, but she was also conflict avoidant by nature. I needed someone with more influence and less to lose. That someone turned out to be my grandmother, Dad's mother, who'd always been the family truth teller. Grandma Rose had a reputation for being blunt to the point of brutality, but she'd also been the only person who'd consistently supported my artistic pursuits. More importantly, she held significant sway over family finances and property decisions. I called her Monday morning, ostensibly to check in, but really to test the waters. "Grandma, I wanted to ask you about something. Do you know why I wasn't invited to Mom and Dad's anniversary party?" Her snort of disgust was audible through the phone. "Oh, honey, you don't know about their little secret, do you? I'm starting to piece things together. How long have you known about the girl years? About them planning to cut you out to make room for her? That's new information that has me madder than a wet hen." Grandma Rose had been excluded from the decision-making about Sophia's introduction to the family, despite being the family matriarch. She was furious not just about the deception but about being sidelined in favor of what she called damage control for their mess. "That girl seems sweet enough," she continued, "but the way they're going about this is wrong on every level. Making you the scapegoat for their guilty consciences, rewriting history to make their affair baby seem like some kind of blessing, it's disgusting. I had my first real ally and she was a powerful one. But I needed more than family support. I needed documentation that would make denial impossible." That's when I remembered Dad's home office. Growing up, it had been strictly off-limits, supposedly because of confidential business documents. But during family gatherings, I'd noticed he kept personal files there too: insurance papers, tax documents, things that might contain evidence of his financial support for Sophia. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Mom called Tuesday morning to invite me to lunch, probably feeling guilty about the anniversary exclusion. Her tone was artificially bright, the voice she used when she was trying to manage a situation. "Maya, honey, your father and I were thinking we should talk. There are some family matters we need to discuss with you." I almost laughed at the transparent attempt at damage control. Someone, probably Jessica or Grandma Rose, had told them I knew about Sophia. Now they wanted to get ahead of the narrative, probably to present some sanitized version where they were the victims of circumstance and I was expected to be understanding and supportive. "Of course, Mom. How about Thursday afternoon? I can come to the house." I could practically hear her relief through the phone. They thought they were going to manage this crisis the same way they'd managed every other family issue, by controlling the narrative and expecting me to fall in line for the sake of family harmony. They had no idea I'd already moved beyond wanting explanations or apologies. This wasn't about reconciliation anymore. This was about making sure the truth came out in a way that couldn't be spun, minimized, or buried under their usual manipulation tactics. By Thursday, I'd have everything I needed to ensure that their carefully constructed facade crumbled in the most public and irreversible way possible. They'd taught me that family loyalty was a one-way street. Now they were about to learn that the road ran both directions. Thursday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn clarity that made everything seem sharper, more defined. I spent the morning preparing for what I knew would be my parents' attempt at damage control, but I had my own agenda. The lunch invitation was perfectly timed. It would give me access to Dad's office while they were distracted with their carefully rehearsed explanations. I arrived at the family home I'd grown up in, noting how different it felt now that I understood the lies that had saturated its walls. Mom greeted me with an overly warm hug and her fake smile, the one she used for difficult social situations. Dad was in his study, making a phone call, but I could see him through the partially open door, his posture tense with anticipation. We thought we'd eat in the sunroom, Mom said, leading me toward the back of the house. It's such a beautiful day, and we have so much to talk about. The conversation unfolded exactly as I'd predicted. They presented Sophia as a challenging situation they'd been managing privately to protect everyone involved. Dad framed his affair as a mistake from a difficult period in their marriage, while Mom positioned herself as the long-suffering wife who'd chosen forgiveness over destruction of the family. We didn't tell you because we knew how you'd react, Mom said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue she'd clearly prepared in advance. You've always been so black and white about things, so judgmental. We needed time to figure out how to help Sophia without causing unnecessary drama. The gaslighting was masterful in its subtlety. They weren't exactly calling me unstable, but they were painting me as too emotional and rigid to handle complex adult situations. Meanwhile, they portrayed Emma as mature enough to understand the delicate nature of the circumstances. Sophia is a lovely young woman, Dad added. She deserves to know her family, and we couldn't let your tendency toward intensity complicate her introduction to everyone else. I played my part perfectly, shocked, hurt, asking all the questions they expected. Why hadn't they trusted me? How long had this been going on? What did this mean for our family moving forward? I even managed a few tears, which seemed to relieve them considerably. We hoped you'd understand, Mom said, reaching across to pat my hand. Family is about forgiveness and moving forward together. After an hour of their carefully orchestrated performance, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Instead, I slipped into Dad's study. Years of sneaking around as a teenager had taught me exactly which floorboards creaked and how to move silently through the house. The filing cabinet I remembered from childhood was still there, and thankfully Dad hadn't updated his security habits. The key was still hidden in the same carved wooden box on his bookshelf. Inside, I found exactly what I'd hoped for, a folder labeled S.M. Personal, tucked behind his insurance documents. The contents were devastating. Bank statements showing monthly payments to Sophia going back 5 years. Copies of tuition payments for a private college I'd never heard of. Medical insurance documents listing her as a dependent. Most damning of all, a handwritten letter from Dad to Sophia on her 21st birthday, expressing his regret at having to keep their relationship private for now, but promising that someday they'd be a real family. I photographed everything with my phone, my hands surprisingly steady despite the magnitude of what I was uncovering. The financial support alone represented hundreds of thousands of dollars, money that had been diverted from our family while they'd constantly stressed about my art school loans and refused to help with my studio rent. But the emotional manipulation documented in those papers was even worse. Text message printouts showed Dad coaching Sophia on how to handle meeting the extended family, essentially training her to replace me in family dynamics. There were shopping receipts for the jewelry I'd noticed her wearing at the anniversary party, jewelry identical to pieces he'd given Mom and Emma over the years. The final document in the folder made my blood run cold. It was a draft of a new will dated just 3 months ago that listed Sophia as an equal beneficiary alongside Emma and me. But more than that, it included a note in Dad's handwriting about adjusting distributions based on family participation and loyalty. They weren't just secretly supporting his affair baby, they were planning to financially punish me for being the inconvenient daughter who'd never quite fit their mold. I'd barely finished photographing the last document when I heard Dad's voice in the hallway. Moving quickly but quietly, I returned everything to its original position and slipped out through the study's side door that led to the garden. When I returned to the sunroom, both parents were watching me carefully, clearly trying to gauge my emotional state and plan their next moves accordingly. I need some time to process all of this, I said, which was exactly what they wanted to hear. It suggested I was overwhelmed but not immediately threatening to their careful plans. Of course, sweetheart, Mom said, her relief palpable. This is a lot to take in. But I hope you'll come to understand that we were trying to handle a difficult situation with grace and maturity. I left their house that afternoon knowing I held the power to destroy their carefully constructed narrative, but I also knew I needed to be strategic about how I used it. The evidence I'd gathered was explosive, but timing would be everything. That evening I called Grandma Rose and shared what I'd discovered. Her reaction was even stronger than I'd expected. Monthly payments for 5 years while they nickel and dimed you through art school, she said, her voice shaking with rage. And they're planning to cut your inheritance because you wouldn't play along with their lies. Grandma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Always am, honey. If this all comes out publicly, will you stand with me, even if it means admitting that your son has been living a lie for years? Her answer came without hesitation. Maya, your grandfather and I built our reputation on honesty and integrity. What your father has done, the lying, the manipulation, the way he's treated you, it goes against everything we raised him to believe. You have my full support, and more than that, you have access to anything you need to make sure the truth comes out. I went to bed that night knowing I had documented proof of their deception and the backing of the family's most influential member. But I also knew that my next moves would change everything irreversibly. There would be no going back to the uneasy status quo we'd maintained for years. The question wasn't whether I would expose their lies, it was how spectacularly I would do it, and whether they'd ever recover from the fallout. Sometimes the truth is the most devastating weapon of all. The opportunity for maximum impact came sooner than I'd expected. Emma called Friday morning, her voice sickeningly sweet with fake concern. Maya, Mom told me about your lunch yesterday. I just wanted you to know that I think you're handling this really maturely. Sophia is excited to meet you properly when you're ready. The condescension in her voice was the final straw. Emma had been in on this deception for over a year, had actively participated in my exclusion, and now she wanted to position herself as the gracious sister, helping me adjust to the new normal. Actually, Emma, I was thinking we should all get together this weekend. Maybe Sunday dinner. I'd love to meet Sophia properly and show everyone how well I'm handling this family expansion. I could hear the surprise in her voice but also the satisfaction. They thought they'd successfully managed me, that I was falling into line just like they'd always expected. That would be wonderful. I'll tell Mom and Dad. They'll be so relieved that you're being so understanding. What they didn't know was that I'd spent Friday morning making very different preparations. The first call was to our local newspaper's lifestyle editor, whom I'd met at a gallery opening months ago. Sarah Chen had been fascinated by my family's prominent position in the community. Dad was a well-known businessman, Mom served on several charity boards, and they were frequently featured in the social pages. Sarah, I have a story that might interest you. It's about family secrets, charity fraud, and the gap between public image and private reality. The charity fraud angle was my master stroke. Going through those financial documents, I'd noticed something that made my stomach turn. Several of the payments to Sophia had been routed through accounts labeled as charitable contributions to a nonprofit that provided educational support for underprivileged young women. My parents had been claiming tax deductions for supporting their secret daughter while publicly taking credit for helping disadvantaged youth. Sarah was immediately interested. How solid is your documentation? Bank records, tax documents, correspondence spanning 5 years. Plus, I can provide testimony from family members who've been aware of the deception. But the newspaper was just the opening move. I had something much bigger planned for Sunday dinner. I spent Saturday creating what I privately called the Sophia Project, a comprehensive digital presentation that told the complete story of my parents' deception, backed up with documents, photos, and timeline evidence. But I didn't plan to present it at dinner. Instead, I was going to use dinner as the final evidence-gathering opportunity. Sunday afternoon, I arrived at my parents' house carrying what appeared to be a beautifully wrapped gift for Sophia. Inside the elegant box was a small digital recording device activated by movement. The gift was designed to sit prominently on the dining room table, capturing every word of what I expected to be a very revealing conversation. Sophia was already there when I arrived, and meeting her in person was surreal. The family resemblance was undeniable. She had Dad's eyes and the same stubborn chin that had always marked the women in our family. But what struck me most was how young she seemed, how genuinely nervous about meeting me. "I'm so glad we're finally getting to meet properly," she said, and I could hear the sincerity in her voice. "I've heard so much about your art. Dad says you're incredibly talented." In that moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She was as much a victim of my parents' manipulation as I was. They'd kept her isolated from half her family for years, fed her carefully crafted stories about why she couldn't meet me until now. She probably had no idea about the financial arrangements or the inheritance planning. But my sympathy for Sophia didn't extend to my parents or Emma, who spent dinner congratulating themselves on how well they'd managed the situation and how mature everyone was being about this complex family dynamic. Dad was particularly self-congratulatory. "I think this shows that sometimes difficult situations work out for the best when handled with wisdom and patience. We've protected everyone involved while finding a way to bring our family together." It just goes to show that real love means making hard choices and putting family harmony above personal feelings. Emma, ever the diplomat, raised her glass. To family secrets that become family blessings, and to Maya for being bigger than we ever expected. The irony was so thick I could taste it. They were toasting their own deception while congratulating me for accepting their manipulation. The recording device captured every self-serving word. After dinner, I helped with dishes while Sophia and Emma chatted in the living room. This gave me the perfect opportunity for my real objective, getting my parents alone for what they thought would be a heart-to-heart about moving forward as an expanded family. "I want you both to know how much I appreciate you trusting me with this." I began activating the voice recording app on my phone while pretending to check messages. "But I do have some questions about the practical aspects of integrating Sophia into the family." What followed was exactly what I'd hoped for: 40 minutes of my parents explaining in explicit detail how they'd managed their deception for years. They talked about the financial arrangements with obvious pride, describing their creative accounting as if it were an impressive business strategy rather than potential fraud. Mom detailed how they'd coached extended family members to keep Sophia secret from me, describing their manipulation tactics as protecting everyone from unnecessary drama. Dad explained his inheritance planning openly, stating that he intended to reward loyalty and family commitment in his will distributions. Most damning of all, they discussed their long-term strategy for gradually marginalizing me within the family structure. They'd already begun positioning Sophia as the easier daughter who didn't challenge their authority or create complications. The plan was to make me feel increasingly unwelcome at family events until I naturally distanced myself, leaving them free to build their preferred family dynamic around Emma and Sophia. By the time I left that evening, I had everything I needed. Hours of recordings, comprehensive financial documentation, and testimony from family members who'd been uncomfortable with the deception for years. The next morning, I sent everything to Sarah Chen, along with a detailed timeline and explanation. But I also did something else. I created social media accounts on every major platform and began uploading the evidence with strategic hashtags about family deception, charity fraud, and inheritance manipulation. The story wasn't just going to come out in the local newspaper's lifestyle section. It was going to explode across the internet, complete with documentation that made denial impossible. My parents had taught me that image and reputation were everything in their world. They were about to learn what happened when both were stripped away in the most public way possible. The newspaper article went live Tuesday morning with the headline, "Local Business Leaders' Secret Double Life Exposed, Charity Fraud and Family Deception Span Decades." But by then, my social media posts had already gone viral. The combination of documented evidence, audio recordings, and the inherent drama of family betrayal had created a perfect storm of public interest. My phone started ringing at 6 a.m. with Dad's number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was exactly what I'd expected: a mixture of rage, desperation, and attempted manipulation. "Maya, what have you done? You're destroying this family. We can fix this if you just take down those posts and tell people there's been a misunderstanding. Think about what this means for everyone, including Sophia." The mention of Sophia was their last desperate attempt to make me feel guilty, to position me as the cruel daughter who'd hurt an innocent young woman. But I'd anticipated this manipulation tactic and prepared accordingly. By 9 a.m., every major social media platform was buzzing with shares of my story. The combination of family drama, financial fraud, and the visual evidence I'd provided had struck a nerve with people who'd experienced similar family betrayals. Comments poured in from people sharing their own stories of being gaslit by family members, of discovering secret siblings of parents who'd rewritten family history to serve their own agendas. The charity fraud angle had attracted serious attention. 3 different news outlets reached out for follow-up interviews, and someone had apparently contacted the IRS about the questionable tax deductions. The nonprofit that had been used as a front for payments to Sophia issued a statement denying any knowledge of the arrangement and announcing an internal investigation. But the real earthquake hit when Grandma Rose made her move. She'd been planning this for days, waiting for the right moment to maximize impact. At 10 a.m., she walked into Dad's office, the successful real estate firm he'd built his reputation on, and requested an emergency meeting with the board of directors. As the company's majority shareholder and founding investor, Grandma Rose had the power to call for a review of Dad's position, especially in light of the fraud allegations that were now public knowledge. She didn't waste time with subtlety. "My son has been using company resources and reputation to cover up his infidelity and financial manipulation," she announced to the board. "The evidence is now public, and I will not have this family's business destroyed because he couldn't keep his personal corruption separate from professional responsibilities." Jessica called me around noon to report that Emma was having a complete meltdown, and Mom had locked herself in the bedroom and refused to speak to anyone. But the most devastating fallout was happening to Dad's business relationships. 3 major clients had already called to express concerns about continuing their partnerships. The charity boards Mom served on were quietly asking for her resignation. Their social circle, built carefully over decades around their image as the perfect, successful couple, was crumbling in real time as the story spread. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Sophia appeared at my apartment door looking exhausted and confused. "Can we talk?" she asked. "I think I'm finally understanding what's really been happening, and I need to hear your side of the story." I invited her in, genuinely curious about her perspective. It turned out that she'd been as manipulated as I had, just in different ways. "They told me you were unstable," she said quietly, "that you'd had mental health issues and couldn't handle stress. They said they were protecting both of us by keeping us apart until you were ready to meet me." She'd believed their stories about my supposed instability because she'd grown up knowing she was a secret, accepting their explanations. That disclosure had to be carefully managed to protect everyone involved. They'd positioned themselves as the wise parents protecting their damaged older daughter from additional trauma. "But watching you handle this situation," she continued, "seeing the evidence you've put together, the way you've documented everything, this isn't the behavior of someone who's unstable. This is the work of someone who's been systematically lied to and has finally had enough." Sophia revealed something that made my blood run cold. Dad had been preparing to ask her to legally change her last name to ours, and had suggested she might want to consider moving closer to the family. The plan wasn't just to integrate her into family gatherings, they'd been grooming her to completely replace me as their daughter. He kept saying things like, "Some children are just easier to love, and family harmony requires difficult choices," she said. I thought he was talking about general family dynamics, but now I realize he was comparing me to you and finding you wanting. The conversation lasted 3 hours, and by the end, Sophia had made a decision that surprised both of us. She wanted to join forces with me to ensure the complete truth came out, including the emotional manipulation they'd subjected both of us to. "I don't want a relationship built on lies," she said. "If we're going to be sisters, it should be because we choose each other, not because they've manufactured a situation where I replace you." That evening, the local news picked up the story. The footage of Dad leaving his office building, surrounded by reporters asking about charity fraud and family deception, was deeply satisfying to watch. Mom was shown hurrying into their house, shielding her face from cameras while neighbors watched from their windows. But the most powerful moment came when Emma called, sobbing, to beg me to fix this and think about the family. "You've destroyed everything," she cried. "Dad might lose his business, Mom's humiliated, and everyone's talking about us. How could you do this to your own family?" Her complete inability to understand that I was responding to their destruction of our family, not causing it, perfectly encapsulated everything that had been wrong with our family dynamics for years. In Emma's world, I was supposed to quietly accept being lied to, manipulated, and gradually replaced, because keeping up appearances was more important than truth or justice. "Emma," I said calmly, "they made their choices. Now they're living with the consequences. That's how accountability works." I hung up, knowing that bridge was permanently burned but feeling lighter than I had in years. The truth was finally out, the gaslighting had stopped, and the people who'd spent years making me question my own reality were now facing the consequences of their deception. Sometimes burning it all down is the only way to build something honest from the ashes. 6 months later, the landscape of my life had transformed completely. Dad's real estate business survived barely after Grandma Rose implemented strict oversight and forced him into a minority partnership role. The IRS investigation resulted in substantial penalties and back taxes, effectively draining the inheritance adjustment fund he'd been planning to use to punish me financially. Mom lost her positions on 3 charity boards, and her standing in their social circle never recovered. The revelation that their perfect marriage had been built on deception and their family values platform was pure fiction had made them social pariahs among the conservative community where image was everything. But the most satisfying consequence was watching their carefully constructed narrative crumble as more family members found the courage to speak their truth. Jessica revealed years of pressure to keep secrets and participate in the gaslighting. Uncle Richard admitted he'd been uncomfortable with the deception from the beginning but had been intimidated into silence. Even Emma eventually acknowledged that she'd known the situation was wrong but had enjoyed the feeling of being the good daughter too much to speak up. The newspaper series that followed Sarah Chen's initial article became a case study in family manipulation tactics and financial fraud. I was invited to speak at several conferences about recognizing gaslighting within family systems, turning my painful experience into something that could help others identify similar patterns in their own lives. Most importantly, my relationship with Sophia evolved into something genuine and chosen rather than manufactured by our parents' agenda. We decided to build our sisterhood on our own terms, meeting for coffee every few weeks, sharing stories about our experiences growing up on different sides of the same deception. She eventually moved across the country to start fresh, away from the toxic dynamics that had shaped both our childhoods. "You saved us both," she told me before leaving. I was starting to lose myself, trying to be their perfect replacement daughter. Watching you refuse to accept their manipulation taught me that I had choices too. Grandma Rose became my strongest family ally, using her influence to ensure I was included in all major family decisions moving forward. She also made it clear to Dad that any further attempts to marginalize me would result in complete disinheritance. "Your father forgot that respect isn't inherited," she told me over one of our weekly lunch dates. "It's earned through integrity and lost through deception." You reminded him of that lesson. My art career flourished in unexpected ways. The publicity around the family scandal led to gallery showings and commissions from people who appreciated both my artistic skill and my courage in exposing difficult truths. I was finally able to afford a proper studio space and quit the part-time retail job that had been supplementing my income. The most profound change was internal. Years of being told I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too unwilling to keep the peace had left me constantly second-guessing my perceptions and reactions. Exposing the truth and watching the evidence speak for itself had restored my confidence in my own judgment. I learned that my supposed sensitivity had actually been my ability to detect lies and manipulation that everyone else was choosing to ignore. My drama had been natural responses to gaslighting and emotional abuse. My unwillingness to keep the peace had been integrity, refusing to participate in deception. The family gatherings I now attended were smaller but infinitely more honest. Grandma Rose, Jessica, Uncle Richard, and a few cousins who'd grown tired of the toxic dynamics formed what Sophia and I called our chosen family people, connected by mutual respect and genuine affection rather than obligation. Manipulation. Dad and Mom made several attempts at reconciliation, always framed as my need to forgive and move on for the sake of family unity. They never acknowledged the years of emotional manipulation, or showed genuine remorse for the systematic way they'd undermined my confidence and belonging. Eventually, I stopped responding to their overtures, choosing peace over the endless cycle of fake apologies and repeated betrayals. Emma maintained her position that I'd overreacted and destroyed the family over ancient history. She continued to believe that keeping secrets and protecting appearances was more important than honesty or accountability. We remained estranged by mutual choice. She couldn't handle having a sister who refused to enable dysfunction, and I couldn't maintain a relationship built on denial and emotional manipulation. The most unexpected gift came in the form of connections with other people who'd experienced similar family betrayals. My social media posts had attracted hundreds of messages from people sharing their own stories of being scapegoated, gaslit, or written out of family narratives. Some of these connections evolved into genuine friendships with people who understood the unique pain of family betrayal and the courage required to choose truth over comfort. Looking back, I realized that my parents had done me an inadvertent favor by excluding me from their anniversary party. If they'd successfully managed the introduction of Sophia while keeping me in the dark about the financial arrangements and inheritance planning, I might never have discovered the full extent of their deception. Their attempt to erase me from the family story had instead given me the evidence I needed to reclaim my narrative and expose their lies. The story became a reminder that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is refuse to accept treatment that diminishes your worth. Family relationships built on deception, manipulation, and conditional acceptance aren't worth preserving at any cost. Today, my life is smaller in some ways but immeasurably richer in authenticity and peace. I wake up each morning knowing that every relationship in my life is based on genuine mutual respect rather than obligation or fear. The people in my chosen family celebrate my successes, support me through challenges, and treat me as a full human being worthy of honesty and consideration. Have you ever discovered that your family's love came with impossible conditions? Maybe you've been the scapegoat who finally refused to carry everyone else's dysfunction, or perhaps you've had to choose between truth and keeping the peace. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Sometimes the most healing thing is knowing we're not alone in these experiences. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life drama and the lessons we learn when we refuse to accept less than we deserve. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they're not crazy for questioning family dynamics that don't feel right. Thank you for listening to my story and for supporting content that talks honestly about the messy realities of family relationships. Remember, you deserve to be surrounded by people who see your worth and treat you accordingly. Sometimes the family we choose becomes more precious than the one we're born into, and that's perfectly okay.